Barbell Apparel's Black Friday sale is kicking off with steep discounts on any pants, joggers, or jeans. Do not wait, go now. Possessing a big bent row is a signal of strength that is more universally impactful than any big press could be. And that strength is impossible to develop without undergoing a Koopa Troopa level of transformation. If we're looking for a singular main lift for the biggest muscles of your upper body, there just simply isn't another candidate. But despite the row being simple, effective, and simple, it's still under attack. It's a tale as old as time. Wherever kingdoms have been built from elegant simplicity, you can be sure that intellectuals are on their way, with gas cans full of unnecessary complexity. Now, the worst offenders against the barbell row include the guru with a personality disorder. Grab your telescope, put on your white sneakers, and pop in your favorite leg day gum. As it turns out, effort and progressive overload are completely optional when you have a dentist-level understanding of biomechanics and are surgery pilled.
Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough to get up to 88.
We're going, we don't need.
Then you have their second in command, the apprentice of the science-based guru, the broccoli-headed teen talker. Because obviously we want our textbooks revised by the unemployed dependents who rent-a-car agencies deemed too cognitively undeveloped to trust with a 2006 Corolla. But experience and qualifications be damned, they're sure going to tell you about the epiphanies that led to their astonishing Gumby build. You sure you're not on steroids, bro? And all of this nonsense doesn't propagate without the masses supporting the bottom of the pyramid, the foot soldiers of trendy bullshit, the tribal follower. The typical tribal follower is just a person who gets really excited about this new thing that they found. And I gotta tell you about this thing, man, but I can't do it justice. You gotta read this guy's book. I swear, he's a genius. He'll make it all make sense. And of course, this status at the bottom of the totem pole doesn't stop them from posting vehemently in the comment sections. All of these villain groups take what should be an easily accessible goal, which is an upper back worthy of attracting a mate, and hides it behind the wild goose chase of optimized training. Well, I'm here to break the cycle and help you pass down your genes into the future. We're going to push back against the scourge of mediocrity, and we're going to use the bent row to do it. So what is the best way to build a big back? Well, it's the best way to do anything else. Do as much as you can for as long as you can without falling apart. Notice that no one is taking the minimalist approach to becoming a millionaire or winning a Super Bowl. I don't care if I get 90% of my gains in the first hour. I said best. I want that extra 10% and I'll spend another 4 hours in the gym to get it. Now, of course, we have to bring this back down to earth. The reason the culture of the barbell persists in the first place is not because the world is filled with people that want to squeeze every last bit of potential out of their time on earth. It persists because people have shit to do, and everyone who lives in the real world with mounting obligations is perfectly justified to say, by best, I mean, given my available resources and level of commitment. What you really want is the smallest list of things that guarantee the result so that you can happily cut away all the rest. You want bang for the buck. In that context, the best way to get an armadillo shell upper back is through bent rows. Treat it as a main lift using a basic ass strength progression like you would for any other barbell movement. That's exactly what Ed Cohn did. He put accessories like behind the neck presses, skull crushers, and bent rows on the same periodized plan as his main lifts. And I heard he was pretty fucking good. The naysayers are still going to pop up with their petty dissent, and we're going to take those complaints one by one, because in those complaints, my dear lifter, will be revealed the truth of bent barbell row supremacy, as well as the exact qualities that make any exercise worth a good goddamn. Thing number one, the technique of the bent row is actually really hard for beginners. It takes effort to hold position, it's harder to coordinate, and as they fatigue, reps get really inconsistent. Technique is hard, you say? Well, for my first point, no, it's not. And for my second point, no, it's fucking not. Compared to any other free weight compound movement, the barbell row requires the fewest amount of IQ points. People aren't getting stuck by constantly fixating on their scapular retraction or elbow tuck like they do at the bench. They're not always retooling their stance, tempo, or depth like they do with squats and deadlifts. You just grab the bar and pull. It really is that easy. Thing number two. Stimulus to fatigue ratio is not optimal here. You'll incur excessive teardown that will prolong recovery and interfere with other vital stimulatory activities. I see the lazy powerlifters teamed up with the science-based nerds. I love to see different groups getting along. If you suggest to somebody that they should not be so eager to wrench their spine under a super maximal deadlift attempt, it will often get met with cries of fear-mongering and nociception. Yet, if you suggest that taking a third of the same amount of weight and holding it in an isometric position with a neutral spine for the 13 seconds it takes to do 10 reps of rows, their response would make you think that you were telling them to go get a job moving gun safes. Barbell rows do incur a lot more fatigue than other exercises, but that's a feature, not a bug. They're fatiguing because they do more per repetition. Bang for the buck is what we're here for, remember? So every rep and every increase in weight teaches you better to brace. It reinforces the hinge position, and it hits every muscle in the back and does so in the context of a bent over supported position, which gentler variations just simply don't do. You don't need genetic modification or a time machine to go back and swap out your parents in order to get jacked. You just need a proven training template and the means to personalize it to you. Base Strength AI adjusts volume and intensity minute to minute, day to day, block to block according to your tolerances to keep you in the pocket. There is no anxiously waiting for a return text from your coach in the middle of a bad workout. Everything is automated specifically to you. It could not be easier. This is not generative AI. These are my programs in your back pocket, personalized to you at 1/10 of the cost of an online coach. So put your gains on autopilot this year. Go to basestrength.com. Now, once you establish that the fatigue experience by doing a bend row is not beyond the limits of natural human beings, the anti-row goobers will switch the focus to the other side of the equation, the stimulus. Rule number 1 of navigating the online fitness space is to take the concept of stimulus, package it up, put it in a nice box, wrap it in your best wrapping paper, put a nice shiny bow on the top, write a letter, tape it to the side, and throw it out the window. It's like if you're busting your ass in the hot sun, digging a hole with a shovel, and someone comes along and in a very optimistic tone says, "Hold on just a second, we can do better than that." And for a moment, you might believe that they're coming back with something more efficient, more time-saving, more productive. And after waiting with bated breath, you realize that the improvement they were promising was a hairbrush and some tweezers. Everything you could possibly do in the gym counts as a stress. But pedantic weirdos tried to use cheap rhetoric to leverage authority by labeling the things they do as stimulating. The implication here being that stimulation is a stress specifically done in service of gains. Like, what was I doing? Adding stress in service of my crippling anxiety? Using the word stimulus as a label to describe whatever convoluted nonsense you invented doesn't make it more targeted or precise, but people will still respond to that jargon as if it does. The back is a big-ass muscle group. It does a really big job, and it grows incredibly well when you give it a big job to do and progress it forward. For Christ's sake, psychology shows that people can't even be given too many magazine options without devolving into an existential crisis. So whatever extra margin of improvement you think you're going to get by quibbling over a million different points of exercise optimization, that is going to more than get eaten up with the doom spiral of eternal choice. So you can live and die for the arguments about internal leverage or optimized strength curves, or eagerly try to reinvent the wheel every time a tween without a bank account finds a new way to misuse gym equipment. Or you can just do your goddamn rows. And lastly, the final bit of dissent, the because pull-ups crew. All of the calisthenic adjacent disciplines are cool, and they will certainly help you develop a more formidable upper body. But forgive me if I'm not going to prioritize the favorite exercise of underweight casuals over the entire history of big-backed mutants. Pull-ups fall short in a couple of arenas. The spine not being loaded, I think, is actually a detriment, and horizontal pulling movements are also going to involve a lot more total musculature than vertical pulling. Add in the instability and the fact that it's a giant pain in the ass to load and incrementally progress weight. All of that makes this basically a worse version of a pull down. Now this is where the "trust me bro, I heard it from someone smart" tribalists come in and start to white knight for their fair lady the pull-up. The number one comment in the comment section is going to be that I can't do them. Yeah, totally. Let's just say I can't do a single one. I spent 20 years competing in a sport that is literally pulling. So if they're not good for me, how the f are they good for anybody else? Pull-ups are a fine exercise. I'm not here to tell you to just pick one or never do them, but don't delude yourself that anybody ever picked up a 400-pound sandbag, or harder yet, your mom, because they got their pull-ups really good. So that's enough gym shaming. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how we are actually going to approach rows to get the best possible outcome. So finding your best technique is actually easier than many of you might think. I maintain that your best main lift technique should be at the intersection of the most and least advantage variations that you can come up with. Higher advantage compound movements are going to have very low range of motion. There's going to be lots of cheat, and they're going to be good for developing strength in that particular range, but they're going to have less carryover to gains overall. On the other end, you have very disadvantaged movements, which go through a huge range of motion, are often very awkward, and usually isolated. These will have some general carryover to other qualities and will be pretty good for muscle growth, but they're often limited in strength development because you are limited by the weakest and most awkward position in the movement. For squatting, benching, and deadlifting, you can think of the most optimized setups that try to get the most weight lifted to the specifications of the rules. And it's pretty well known that the most optimized variations just don't build a lot of muscle or give a lot of strength in different positions. The variations in the bent row go from obnoxiously bent over with a wide grip and flared elbows, turning the movement into something like a weighted face pull, to being so high that you would swear they're trolling. My default recommendation for people is to use a technique that's strict, but have your hips set back so that you can handle a lot of weight while being stable, and aim for a perfectly flat back, knowing that most people will inadvertently end up a few degrees above parallel anyways. I do think it's important for people starting out to earn their stripes with a really steep bent over row because it's better for teaching bracing, teaching coordination, and it's going to be easy to have the reps be more consistent. Power rows are great down the line, but just like every bicep, pec, shoulder exercise that you could do in the gym, it's always going to be smooth, stable through a pretty full range of motion, so there's no reason why your main rowing movement shouldn't be as well. You gotta walk before you can run, kids. I also like to have people float their rows. It's common for people to start with something like a pen lay or a power row, but that's aesthetics more than anything. The fact is, not touching the ground forces your brace to work harder, and it makes the start of the pull harder. Where normally the bottom position of barbell movements are actually the hardest position because the joints are furthest away from the center of mass, it's the exact opposite with a row. You're starting with your arms straight, which means there's no moment. And as your elbows get further apart from each other, the muscles have to work harder and harder to move the same weight. This is why when people fail to do a perfect rep in a rowing movement, they find that they can work the bottom half almost indefinitely. Magical gains trick number 3 is to use your biceps. Now, this is one you're not going to hear a whole lot of, but I swear by this. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Do you know anybody, even a diehard bodybuilder, who aims to bench press without the use of their triceps? Now, the easiest way to conceptualize this is to think about what benchers do to facilitate tricep use to lock out big weights. They don't just push straight up and hope for the best. They physically squeeze the bar and pull apart. Flip that around in reverse, and you are pulling the bar in. That's activating your biceps and contributing more engagement that's going to result in more weight being pulled up. Another tactic I like, especially when people are starting out, is to have them pause at the top. Now, the rationale for this is as follows. If you're like most people, you're going to shut your row down when you just can't touch, or you're going to continue doing work through a partial range of motion on the bottom end. This tends to lead to an overdevelopment of the bottom half of the movement where you're already in a stronger position from the leverage advantage that we just covered. If you make this a staple, it's just like doing all your deadlifts from a dead stop. You're going to take what is typically a weak point for a lot of people and make it a complete afterthought. Super special technique pointer number 5, touch at the top of your abdominals. The higher you touch on your chest, the more awkward it is. Yes, you are going to hammer the holy hell out of your traps, rear delts, and rhomboids, but it's going to come at the expense of a lot of weight. Now, the lower you go below your belly button, the more the range of motion drops, so weight climbs, but it's a very small range of motion, and bodybuilders will say this is a lower lat developer. Don't overthink this one. You just have to make sure you're not going to an extreme in one direction or the other. And finally, number 6, and arguably the most important point, is to understand grace in a bent row. Some people will romanticize the strength, power, effort, fatigue of a bent row and will start day one with really sloppy, unhinged movement mechanics. That's antithetical to everything that we just established. However, some other people will put too much of a premium on strictness, which will make sure in this standing bent over position that you actually never really work hard enough to get as much of a stress as you need. It's okay if a little bit of sway ends up working its way in. It's okay if you miss touching your abdomen by an inch or two. Just know that it's much worse to habitually cut the set early when you still have a lot in the tank than to commit the eternal sin of not being a technique cyborg. If we ever saw a video of somebody as big as Ronnie Coleman in his prime, and he was doing super bent over, hyper strict rows, going through an exaggerated range of motion like an autistic dachshund, we might be inclined to say, that doesn't really look right. OCD is something to be treated, not normalized. So let's keep it out of your program. So that's all I got for today, guys. That is the bent row explained. I'm sure I insulted enough of the gym community that I'm going to be getting some hate in the comments, so I'll see you all there. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.